Life is a delicate balance between freedom and responsibility. As you get older, you might believe that your experiences grant you the right to wander wherever you please, to impose yourself on the lives of others, as if time alone has earned you that privilege. But wisdom is knowing that just because you can doesn't mean you should. Some places are not for you, not because of laws, but because of principles. Because the wrong environment can erode your dignity, waste your time, and entangle you in chaos. There are 4 kinds of people whose homes you must avoid, no matter how free you think you are. There is a certain type of person you must avoid if you value your time, your energy, and your sanity. This is the person who has made victimhood their identity, who sees life as a relentless stream of injustices stacked against them. They are not merely people who have suffered, because suffering is inevitable. They are people who have chosen to define themselves entirely by their suffering, to weave a narrative in which they are always wronged, always mistreated, always the unfortunate casualty of someone else's actions. And if you are not careful, their story will entangle you. At first, it may seem harmless. You visit their home, perhaps out of kindness or nostalgia or obligation. You sit down, and they begin to speak. But their words are not about ideas or growth or solutions. No, their words are a detailed, well-rehearsed script of grievances. They will recount every wrong ever committed against them, every betrayal, every disappointment. The past is never the past for them. It is a weapon they wield to justify their stagnation. Their pain is not something to overcome. It is something to hold on to feed, to nurture like a pet that will never be released. And as they speak, you feel a shift in the air. You recognize the patterns, the way every story leads to the same conclusion, that they are helpless, that they are owed something by the world, that they are waiting for an external force to correct the injustice of their existence. They do not seek advice, they seek validation. They do not want solutions, they want an audience. And if you provide them with what they seek, you will become a fixture in their ongoing tragedy. The danger of the perpetual victim is not just that they complain. Complaints are natural, even necessary at times. No, the real danger is that they demand your emotional investment. They do not want sympathy. They want participation. They want you to confirm that yes, the world is unfair, and yes, they have been mistreated, and yes, they deserve more than what they have. And in that confirmation, you take on a role in their drama. You become the listener, the consoler, the one who reinforces their belief that life has conspired against them. And if you allow yourself to be cast in that role, it will never end. These people are exhausting not because of what they have suffered, but because of what they refuse to do. They refuse to take responsibility. Responsibility is terrifying to them because it implies power, and power contradicts their belief that they are helpless. To accept responsibility for their own lives would mean acknowledging that they have choices, that they can act, that they are not mere victims of fate. And so they reject responsibility entirely, choosing instead to remain passive, to dwell in bitterness rather than fight for change. You will notice, if you spend enough time with them, that their stories never include self-reflection. If a relationship failed, it was always the other person's fault. If they lost a job, it was because of a bad boss, never their own performance. If they are lonely, it is because others abandoned them, never because they push people away. In their world, they are never accountable for their own misfortunes. And this is where you must be careful, because human nature inclines us toward empathy, toward wanting to help, toward offering advice and encouragement. But with the perpetual victim, your kindness will be wasted. If you suggest solutions, they will reject them. If you offer perspective, they will dismiss it. If you try to lift them up, they will weigh you down instead. They are not looking for a way forward. They are looking for someone to join them in their suffering. Even worse, the perpetual victim often resents those who refuse to play along. If you do not agree with their perspective, if you challenge their narrative, they will turn against you. They will see you as another person who doesn't understand, another example of the world being unfair to them. You will find that their kindness is conditional. So long as you validate their worldview, you are welcome. The moment you question it, you become part of the problem. This is why you must avoid their homes, because the moment you step inside, you enter a space governed by stagnation, a space where growth is unwelcome, where bitterness is nurtured, where blame is currency. And no matter how strong you think you are, prolonged exposure to such an environment will change you. You will absorb some of their cynicism. You will begin to see the world through their distorted lens, and you will waste hours, days, even years trying to save someone who does not want to be saved. The reality is, life is difficult for everyone. We all experience injustice. We all suffer losses, betrayals, disappointments. But the difference between those who grow and those who stay stuck is the willingness to take ownership of their own fate. The perpetual victim has made a choice to surrender to bitterness rather than to fight for meaning. And if you want to protect your own energy, your own mindset, your own future, you must make a choice as well. A choice not to participate in their endless cycle of blame and stagnation. A choice to walk away. There are people in this world who do not invite you into their lives out of kindness, but out of calculation. Their words are smooth, their gestures carefully chosen, their smiles well practiced. At first, they seem warm, perhaps even generous. They say the right things, they make you feel seen, valued, even special. But beneath it all, there is an agenda. One that serves them and only them. If you are not careful, you will walk into their home believing you are a guest, only to realize too late that you are nothing more than a piece in their game. Manipulators do not control people through force. That would be too obvious, too crude. Instead, they control through subtle influence, through shaping your perceptions, through making you feel as though what they want is what you want. They know how to create an illusion of choice, where every path somehow leads to their benefit. And the most dangerous part is that you may not even realize you are being used until the damage is already done. At first, you might feel drawn to them. They have a way of making you feel important, like you are uniquely understood, like there is something about you that they truly appreciate. But this is not admiration. It is a tool. They are studying you, figuring out what drives you, what insecurities you carry, what desires linger in your mind. Every compliment, every moment of attention, every seemingly innocent question is a thread they are weaving into a net designed to capture you. And once you are caught, you will find that their generosity was never real. It was an investment, and now it is time for them to collect their return. A manipulator's home is a place where the lines between giving and taking are blurred. They will ask for favors in ways that make refusal feel impossible. They will frame their needs as your duty, their burdens as yours to bear, and they will do it in such a way that you feel guilty even questioning it. You may tell yourself that you are helping a friend, supporting someone in need, being a good person, but deep down, something will feel off. There will be a weight to the relationship that you cannot quite explain, a quiet exhaustion that grows each time you interact. They will take from you, not always in obvious ways. Sometimes it is your time stretched thin by their endless crises. Sometimes it is your energy drained by their emotional demands. Sometimes it is your confidence chipped away by their backhanded compliments and subtle criticisms. And sometimes it is your freedom as they manipulate circumstances to make you dependent on them, to make you feel as though stepping away would mean betraying them. And if you ever do try to step away, to set boundaries, to question the dynamic, you will see another side of them. The warmth will fade, replaced by disappointment, by hurt, by accusations that you are ungrateful, that you have changed, that you are abandoning them. They will remind you of everything they have done for you, everything they have given. But this is not true generosity. It is a transaction, one they expected you to keep paying for indefinitely. The worst kind of manipulators are the ones who make you question yourself. They excel at twisting reality, at making you feel as though your instincts cannot be trusted. They will downplay their actions, shift blame, rewrite events to make you doubt your own memory. They will tell you that you are overreacting, that you are imagining things, that you are the problem. And if you let them, they will reshape your understanding of reality to suit their needs. This is why you must be careful. Manipulators do not always appear as villains. They are not always cruel, not always obvious in their tactics. Sometimes they come disguised as mentors, as lovers, as old friends who claim to have your best interests at heart. And that is what makes them so dangerous, because you do not see the trap until it is already closed around you. You may think that you are strong enough to resist, that you can engage with them without falling under their influence. But even the strongest minds can be worn down by prolonged exposure. The more time you spend in their world, the more their reality starts to feel like truth. And before you know it, you are acting against your own interests, making choices that serve them rather than yourself. The only way to win against a manipulator is not to play. Do not engage in their games. Do not fall for their flattery. Do not step into their home believing you will leave unchanged. Because once you are inside, the rules are theirs, and they never play fair. There are places where chaos is not just an occasional disturbance, but a way of life. There are people who do not simply experience disorder, but cultivate it, who exist in a perpetual state of instability and expect everyone around them to bear the weight of it. Their homes are not just messy in the physical sense, they are messy in every way that matters. Their finances are a disaster, their relationships are in shambles, their emotions swing unpredictably from one extreme to another, and there is never any real effort to impose order upon the madness. Instead, they rely on the people around them to absorb the consequences of their reckless existence. And if you are not careful, you will be pulled into their storm. At first, it may seem like they just need a little help. They will tell you about the string of bad luck they have had, the people who have let them down, the reasons why their life is the way it is. It will sound convincing because they believe it themselves. They will make it seem as though they are merely victims of unfortunate circumstances, that if just one thing had gone differently, everything would be better. But the truth is, their lives are not chaotic by accident. They are chaotic by choice, by repeated careless decisions, by an unwillingness to take responsibility, by a deep-seated resistance to structure, discipline, or planning. And the moment you step into their world, you will feel it. The disorder is overwhelming, suffocating, ever-present. It is in their surroundings. The unpaid bills scattered on the table, the broken furniture left unfixed, the clutter that has been ignored for so long that it has become part of the background. It is in their relationships, the constant fights, the dramatic breakups and reconciliations, the endless complaints about betrayals and disappointments that always seem to follow the same pattern. It is in their habits, the missed deadlines, the reckless spending, the inability to commit to anything beyond the next impulsive decision. What makes these people dangerous is not just their chaos, but the way they make it your problem. They will lean on you when they are in trouble, expecting you to provide support, to offer solutions, to clean up the mess they refuse to manage themselves. They will frame it as friendship, as trust, as a sign that they value you. But in reality, they do not want a friend, they want a crutch. They want someone who will take responsibility for the consequences they refuse to face, and if you help them once, they will come back again. Each time the request will be small, reasonable, almost insignificant. A little favor, a little assistance, just this once. But just this once never means just once. Their chaos is a bottomless pit, and no amount of effort on your part will ever fill it. The more you give, the more they will need. The more you try to help, the more they will rely on you. And before long, you will find yourself tangled in their dysfunction, constantly putting out fires that they themselves set, sacrificing your own time, your own energy, your own peace of mind to stabilize a life that is designed to remain unstable. You may think that you can guide them toward order, that with the right advice, the right support, they will change. But you must understand this: people who live in reckless chaos do not want order. If they did, they would have sought it out themselves. They are not looking for solutions, they are looking for enablers. And if you give them the structure they refuse to build for themselves, they will take from you until you have nothing left to give. The longer you stay in their world, the more their chaos infects your own life. You will find yourself constantly distracted, constantly drained, constantly pulled into problems that should never have been yours to begin with. Your own goals, your own responsibilities, your own peace will take a back seat to the endless drama that surrounds them. And worst of all, you will come to accept this as normal. You will adapt to the dysfunction, adjusting your expectations, lowering your standards, making excuses for behavior that should never have been tolerated. You must recognize the cost of engaging with such people before it is too late. Because chaos is not just something that stays contained within the walls of their home. It spreads, it seeps into your thoughts, your habits, your emotions. And if you are not careful, you will wake up one day to find that their recklessness has become your burden, their instability has become your struggle, and their disorder has become your life. There are places in this world where you are not truly welcome, even if you are invited inside. Homes where the air is thick with unspoken criticism, where every glance carries an undercurrent of disapproval, where your presence is tolerated rather than embraced. These are not places of warmth, of friendship, of belonging. They are places of quiet judgment, where your past is never forgotten, where your mistakes are never forgiven, and where you are always on trial, whether you realize it or not. The people who inhabit these spaces may not openly express their disapproval, but you will feel it the moment you walk through the door. It will be in the way they greet you, polite but distant, in the way they speak to you, measured, careful, avoiding anything that might suggest genuine affection, in the way they look at you, eyes scanning, evaluating, searching for something to confirm what they already believe about you. These are not people who see you for who you are now. They see only the version of you that they have frozen in time, the version they have judged and categorized, the version that no matter how much you have grown, they refuse to let go of. Every conversation in such a home is a test. They will bring up your past, not as a means of understanding, but as a way to remind you of where you have failed. They will mention old mistakes in passing, disguised as harmless remarks, as jokes, as casual observations that carry the weight of unspoken accusations. They will compare you to others, subtly implying that you are lacking, that you have fallen short, that no matter what you have achieved, it will never be quite enough. And if you try to defend yourself, they will dismiss you as being too sensitive, too defensive, unwilling to take a joke. But the truth is, it was never a joke. It was a verdict delivered in the form of a smile. The longer you stay, the more you will feel the need to prove something, to prove that you have changed, that you are better, that you are worthy of respect. And this is where the real danger lies, because the moment you start seeking their approval, you have already lost. These are not people who are looking to be convinced. Their judgment is not based on facts, but on a need to feel superior, to hold something over you, to remind you that in their eyes you will always be less than. And no amount of success, of personal growth, of effort will ever change that. It does not matter what you have built for yourself, what struggles you have overcome, what wisdom you have gained. To them, you are still the person you were when they first decided to judge you. They will never let you move beyond that moment, because if they did, they would have to acknowledge their own flaws, their own shortcomings, their own failure to see people as complex, evolving beings, and that is something they are not willing to do. What makes these homes particularly dangerous is that the judgment is not always direct. It is often quiet, subtle, woven into the fabric of the environment. It is in the way conversations shift when you enter the room, in the way their praise for others is pointedly exaggerated when you are near, in the way they act as though they are doing you a favor by allowing you into their space. This is not an accident. It is a way of maintaining control, of keeping you in your place, of ensuring that no matter how much time passes, you never forget that you are, in their eyes, not quite good enough. If you are not careful, you will internalize their judgment. You will start to see yourself through their eyes, to question your worth, to wonder if perhaps they are right about you. And this is the true cost of stepping into a home where you are judged rather than welcomed. It is not just about enduring their disapproval. It is about the risk of allowing their perception of you to become your own. You do not owe anyone the performance of proving your worth. The people who truly care for you do not need to be convinced of your value. They see it, they respect it, they celebrate it. They do not hold your past against you, nor do they seek to define you by your worst moments. They recognize that growth is real, that people change, that life is a journey of continuous transformation. But in the homes where judgment reigns, there is no room for that kind of understanding. There is only a fixed image of you, a narrative they have written, a role they expect you to play. And if you allow yourself to step inside, you will find that no matter how hard you try to rewrite the story, the ending has already been decided. Your presence in this world is not insignificant. It is not something to be taken lightly, dismissed, or undervalued. The way you move through life, the energy you bring into a room, the ideas you share, the effort you put into the things that matter, these are not trivial. They shape the world around you, whether you realize it or not. And yet so many people allow themselves to be treated as though their presence is optional, as though their time, their thoughts, their very being can be disregarded or taken for granted. This is a mistake. If you do not recognize the value of your presence, there will always be people who will take advantage of that blindness. They will expect you to be available whenever it is convenient for them. They will take your kindness without appreciation, your time without consideration, your loyalty without reciprocity. And if you let them, they will convince you that this is the natural order of things, that you exist to fill the gaps in their lives, to provide support without expectation, to give endlessly while receiving little in return. But you must understand something. Your presence is not an obligation, it is a gift. It is not something others are entitled to simply because they demand it. The time you give, the energy you invest, the thoughts you share, these are all valuable and they should be treated as such. The people who fail to see this, who fail to respect it, who make you feel as though you are just another replaceable piece in the machinery of their world, do not deserve unlimited access to you. There are those who will act as though your presence in their life is a favor you owe them. They will make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, for saying no, for choosing to protect your time and energy. They will frame your independence as selfishness, your desire for respect as arrogance. But the truth is, those who genuinely value you will never resent your self-respect. They will not see your boundaries as barriers, but as a natural extension of the worth you place on yourself. And the way you allow others to treat you will determine how they continue to treat you. If you permit people to disregard your value, they will. If you tolerate disrespect, it will persist. If you give endlessly without expectation, you will find yourself depleted, drained, and unappreciated. It is not enough to simply hope that others will recognize your worth. You must demand it, first by recognizing it yourself. This does not mean arrogance. It does not mean entitlement. It means carrying yourself with the quiet confidence of someone who understands that their time is limited, their energy is finite, and their presence is meaningful. It means knowing that you are not here to be a convenience for others, to be a silent witness to your own life while everyone else writes the script. You are not an afterthought. You are not a background character. You are here for a reason, and that reason is not to be a passive participant in someone else's story. The world does not benefit from you shrinking yourself. It does not become better when you silence your voice, when you make yourself smaller to accommodate the expectations of others. There are things that only you can offer, perspectives, ideas, actions that only you can bring into reality. And if you allow yourself to be diminished, to be treated as though your presence is insignificant, then the world loses something valuable. The people who truly see you, who truly understand your worth, will never make you feel like a burden. They will not make you question your place in their lives. They will not take your kindness for granted or assume that your presence is guaranteed. They will appreciate, respect, and cherish it. These are the people you must seek out, the relationships you must invest in, the spaces where you should place yourself. But for that to happen, you must first believe in your own worth. You must walk into every room knowing that you belong there, that your thoughts matter, that your presence has meaning. You must stop chasing the approval of those who do not see you and instead focus on those who do. You must stop giving yourself to those who do not appreciate you and instead invest in those who recognize your value. Freedom is one of the most powerful forces in life, but it is also one of the most misunderstood. Many believe that to be free is to be without limits, to cast aside all responsibilities, to do whatever one pleases without regard for consequences. But this is not freedom. It is recklessness. It is chaos disguised as liberation, impulse masquerading as independence. True freedom is not the absence of restraint. It is the ability to choose wisely, to govern oneself, to act in ways that bring meaning and stability rather than disorder and regret. There are people who confuse freedom with foolishness. They think that because no one is stopping them, they can make decisions without thinking of the future, without considering how their actions affect themselves and others. They mistake indulgence for liberation, believing that following every impulse, every fleeting desire is a sign of strength rather than weakness. But the reality is, a person who cannot control themselves is not free. They are a slave to their impulses, to their worst habits, to the destructive cycles they create and repeat without realizing it. A truly free person understands that with freedom comes responsibility. The ability to choose means that choices have consequences, and those consequences shape the course of one's life. To live without thinking, without discipline, without direction is not freedom. It is a slow descent into chaos. It is the reckless spending that leads to debt and dependency. It is the indulgence in pleasure that leads to addiction and regret. It is the avoidance of responsibility that leads to a life without purpose. There are those who will tell you that rules, structure, and discipline are oppressive, that they limit freedom rather than enhance it. But look at the people who live without these things. Are they truly free, or are they constantly trapped in the consequences of their own bad decisions? The person who spends without restraint is not free from financial hardship. The person who eats without care is not free from the suffering of an unhealthy body. The person who avoids work and responsibility is not free from the anxiety of an uncertain future. Freedom is not about doing whatever you want at any given moment. It is about making choices that allow you to continue being free in the long run. A man who neglects his responsibilities in pursuit of pleasure is not free. He is simply borrowing time from his future self, and eventually the debt will come due. The person who abandons all structure in their life does not gain anything lasting. They may feel a temporary sense of liberation, but soon they find themselves bound by new chains. Chains of regret, of instability, of lost potential. Some people believe that because they have no obligations to others, they have no obligations to themselves either. They drift through life without direction, without principles, without any real commitment to anything. But there is a difference between being free and being lost. The person who is truly free is not the one who has no commitments, but the one who has chosen commitments that matter. They are not enslaved by the demands of others, but they are also not enslaved by their own aimlessness. The greatest mistake a person can make is to believe that freedom means the rejection of all discipline, all structure, all responsibility. In reality, these are the very things that protect and sustain freedom. A person who disciplines their mind is free from ignorance. A person who controls their habits is free from destructive cycles. A person who takes responsibility for their life is free from the manipulation of those who would control them. And yet, many reject these truths in favor of a shallow, short-sighted version of freedom. They chase pleasure without considering the cost. They resist all authority without realizing that self-governance requires its own form of discipline. They reject wisdom because it requires effort, choosing instead the easy path of indulgence and recklessness. But easy paths rarely lead anywhere worth going. True freedom is not given, it is earned. Through careful thought, through conscious decision-making, through the willingness to take control of one's own life rather than surrendering it to impulse. A society that values only personal freedom without responsibility inevitably collapses under the weight of its own excesses. An individual who seeks only to indulge in whatever they desire without considering the consequences will find themselves trapped in a life they no longer control. Freedom without wisdom becomes self-destruction. And there is no greater tragedy than a person who once had every opportunity but squandered it in the name of a false and foolish idea of what it means to be free. To be truly free is to understand that freedom is not just about rights, it is also about duties. It is about knowing when to say yes and when to say no. It is about making choices that build a better future rather than chasing pleasures that bring only fleeting satisfaction. It is about having the strength to control oneself, because a person who cannot control themselves will always be controlled by something else. Freedom does not mean foolishness. It means wisdom, discipline, and responsibility. It means choosing the harder path when necessary, resisting temptation when it leads to harm, and building a life that is truly one's own rather than one dictated by fleeting impulses and careless mistakes. Those who understand this will find not only freedom but also strength, purpose, and a life worth living. Those who do not will eventually learn the hard way that without responsibility, freedom is nothing more than an illusion.